Okay, we are live. I think I'm a couple minutes late. It's about it is about 8:02. Um, anyway, it's Folk You Zeus, and I'm trying to get this camera straight. We're still in that. You can still see my kitchen there, but that's okay, I guess. Whatever. All right, that's good enough. Anyway, welcome. Um, if you tuned in last week or saw the last episode, um, it was cut off about halfway through. It's an issue, I think, with my I'm using 5G, home internet type service. It's been pretty good up till now, but it's cut out a couple times and it's less dependable than some other, I would imagine. So I'm going to look at others, but that's another story. Um, what we are talking about is I titled it the rise and fall of the album concept. So we're discussing that. Um, I'm going to go briefly because the last time I did it like more of a comprehensive, somewhat comprehensive history of recorded music mediums. But I'm going to just kind of go over the timeline of what we went through because the idea is to address uh, as we progress through here is to address where it's heading. Um, we're at a cusp right now where there is uh, there's vinyl albums being produced. There's even people's trying to get back to cassettes, and everybody's scrambling trying to figure out with the demise of the CD. But we'll kind of get there. But kind of just to give you a taste of where it all came from and which is kind of gives you options too, because a lot of the times these were technological advances that moved ahead that drove people into another medium. Um, but at the beginning, we talked about sheet music as being really the only way, and that wasn't recorded music. From when people enjoyed music in their homes, somebody in the home played a little piano. Maybe piano was the when the sheet music, popular music, when you had publishers were actually making copies of sheet music, selling at the beginning of the music industry. We talked about it being in the mid 1800s that sheet music came out, and any home can get a piece of sheet music cheap enough. It was thinking if you can afford a piano, um, that was to bring music into your home. Somebody was educated enough in music to read the sheet music and play it, and that's how it began. People might sing along. Um, then it got into we talked a little bit about player pianos. Player pianos being there were rolls that you would set into a piano, and a mechanism inside the player piano would actually play the piano for you. So it opened it up to more. Well, you didn't even have to know how to read music. You didn't have to know how to understand it or whatever. It was played for you perfectly on this piano roll. So that was a huge advancement into home entertainment where but then again you had to be it was more of an upper middle class upper class uh, activity because most people didn't have the finances to be able to afford a player piano. So that wasn't in everybody's home. If everybody had a regular piano, that's another thing too. There were fewer that had that as well. So but what actually happened then, there was the phonograph was invented. Um, at the time it was invented, like most new technologies, it was very scarcely found. People weren't able to mass produce it yet. We're talking about right at the beginning, Industrial Revolution. So the mass production was starting to come. So there, you were able to now be able to have a device that allowed you to bring in somebody else's recorded music into your home. And those were kind of the first. They would come in cylinders. Eventually, it was I think the first recorded cylinder I think was 1877. That makes sense in that era. So you'd have, but then again, as you see there, it's not about an album. This is like one song, maybe two songs, quick songs. So these are short bursts of music that you're able to fit onto these cylinders. Eventually cylinders, they got to a point to where they developed what we kind of know as your phonograph, your turntable, the turntable concept, and 78 records came in to, and then again they couldn't play too long, and maybe fit 2 songs on each side, 3 real short songs, 2 regular songs, maybe 1 epic on a side for that. So then eventually it came in. There were vinyl albums. That was at 78 revolutions per minute, and that's why you couldn't fit as much, because they had to, in order to make that happen, you had to have that many. So you figure you got to have all those grooves, and to do that, technology allowed them to do that and have the 78. 33 and a third and 45s came in at a very similar time. Now, the 45 RPM records, which was a small record, like people were used to just listening for a hit. It was a song. It wasn't about the album. It wasn't, you're going like we know nowadays, like somebody's like the Rolling Stones puts out their new album. You want to hear the album. You want to hear multiple songs from the Rolling Stones. Back then, it was kind of like, well, what's that new song? Because people were used to just those short bursts. On the 78, it's 1 or 2 songs, 3, 4, even maybe on a whole LP, you might say. But they didn't call them LPs because they weren't long plays. But eventually, the 33 and a third allowed them to become what we know as the albums, or the long playing records, LP. So if you hear the term, a lot of people might not even know that term anymore. So LP, and LP is a long playing. That's what it stands for. Record, and they revolved at 33 and a third. That was the standard that you had. So you had that, but the 45s are what took off, because they were the singles. They were a good avenue. We talked about jukeboxes. They were on jukeboxes. A good way for burgeoning publishers and record companies as they were starting out. That's a way to kind of get their advertising up on the jukebox. And as it came through the 1950s and 60s, the jukebox was it. That was the thing. And then obviously radio. And you wanted to get you gave your singles to radio stations, and they would play the hits and that. So it wasn't you handed them an album, say, well, check these out, see if you like one, and play one. That didn't happen until the 70s. And I'm going over this briefly. So if you want to go back, I went a little bit more into depth in the last presentation. Hopefully we'll get through to a full-length video this time. We'll see. But yeah, eventually, when record executives and also radio people started playing more album cuts, and that happened with the expansion of FM, the FM band. That station started opening up in the FM band. It allowed for stereo, which was a new concept in the 1960s. Everything, most stuff was mono. That was just they didn't have that concept of stereo. When stereo was developed, FM radio provided the proper band to be able to broadcast in stereo. We're still to this day, AM radio is mono. That's why it's talk radio mostly, and there's some music radio still on AM, but FM is the way to broadcast stereo. And it allowed, because there was so much space and it wasn't eaten up by the big companies, and there wasn't that competition, you'd have these smaller stations developing locally and being able to play from albums. So the album concept grew as to selling now the albums. So albums, as we said before, were sold. Albums were sold around a hit. So if you had a big hit, well, I used, My Kind of Town by Frank Sinatra. Okay, he'd have that huge hit, and then he put out an album, and on the album it would say featuring the big hit, My Kind of Town. It might feature in smaller letters, maybe 1 or 2 other ones that were popular or something, popular songs that he's covering or whatever. So yeah, you've got that kind of a situation where it's still about the hit song, So you're not releasing too many, uh, uh, you're not pushing a whole album song. You're still doing that. So that was early on in the LPs when they start doing LPs on a regular basis, and that. So that developed to a point to where now, okay, now you've got an option. You've got DJs coming on that have a little leeway to dig deeper into the albums and find something to listen to a whole album, and they'll say, "Wow, this is a cool tune that never got played on the AM radio." So FM became the thing. Album-oriented rock (AOR) radio took over in the '70s and became the vehicle. So you had if you put out an album, you might have one hit, but if the rest of the album sucked, or none of the DJs liked any of the other song, it's short lived. You might get a blast because of the hit, but you'd have so many albums coming out where there are no hits, but it got a lot of airplay on AOR stations, which are burgeoning and becoming the norm for radio listeners. So so like a lot of those top 40 stations were dying come the late 1970s. Okay, there were more the top 40. There was still a concept of the top 40, and there still is, and probably always will be. The songs are meaningful, but the album itself was something that was different for the listener now in the '70s and '80s. And we talked about the LPs having the dynamic of a side A and a side B. I remember when we would talk about the albums when we were kids. We talked about the albums that we like. Yeah, my favorite, man. Who's next? Side A of Who's Next, and then side B of Rockin' the Fillmore from was a double album, side 3 or 4, whatever. So you'd have that where you'd talk about album sides, and you'd say, I remember there was an album side that I really loved was the first album side on Madman Across the Water from Elton John. That was one of my favorite album sides. I think it had Leave On, Tiny Dancer. I can't remember all the songs. I think there were 4 songs on that one side, and I listened to the shit out of just that one side because you're putting the record on a turntable and it falls in that side A. So when I put the album, I said, should I listen to side B? Nah, I like side A. So you just do it that way. So you're kind of like side B can kind of get neglected, or kind of leaves you to a point to where, hey man, it's about time I listen to side B of Madman Across the Water. I flipped it over and I said, whoa, this is good stuff too. But it wasn't the actually the side A stuff is what got played on the AOR stations more. The semi hits, if you want to call them hits of that album, and it happened with all albums. Everybody have their favorite sides on that, so you'd have, and it allowed you to have 2 lead songs, because I'm a producer who makes albums. Okay, I'm a musician. I'm also an engineer, sound engineer, and I've been producing my own stuff. I've produced some other people's stuff, but mainly my own stuff. And back when I did I did one vinyl album way back, and you thought about it that way. Says, well, what's going to be the lead song on side A? What's going to be the lead song on side B? Okay, so now we progress, and 8-tracks came in a very, very short period. The reason 8-tracks came in is because now they were made for cars. So they started selling tape units for cars. That was the way you were able to play music in a car outside of the radio. All right. So if you wanted to I remember having Led Zeppelin 4 and lots of problems with the 8-tracks. In the last discussion I talked about it, it's like the quality is not there because what you're doing is pressing the tape up against the head. It's not being grabbed in by a head. So it's like it's not true. So you get a little fuzziness. That's just from an engineer's point. It sounded fine, for what we were doing. It was like, yeah, we got music in our car. We got an 8-track machine. Yeah. I remember having one stolen, and everybody's stealing 8-track machines because it was the new thing. And it was like, but they lasted for a little while just because of that concept. And 8-track machine had 4 programs, and it was weird because they would just divide these albums up. I remember Stairway to Heaven on Led Zeppelin 4. It was on 2 different tracks, so a track would end with Stairway to Heaven, and it kind of faded out to make it, and then it fade back up into the next track. So it was kind of like you weren't getting the whole thing connected. So that was a mess a little bit with 8 tracks. I know a lot of people that are my age or even younger remember that a little bit, but new people might the not dynamics if you're younger and stuff like that. They understand the dynamics of the medium that was, and why it didn't last. It was kind of quirky and didn't sound as good. So then eventually cassettes, we said cassettes was something that had been around. We talked about reel to reel, talked about the whole tape evolution. Reel to reel was very clean, very great and way to listen. Analog was the best. People would say it was the best. It was better than records, and there was an argument with that. But eventually, when you do a record, you record to a tape. Back in those days, now you can still do that, or you record to a digital unit, what they call a DAW. So there's that digital analog thing. But back in those days, it was analog, all analog, and you'd first have to do a tape. You record everything tape, and then you put it on an album, put on a vinyl record as we knew them. So there was that tape evolution that was used for the master to make the parts that were necessary to press the vinyl. And that's still the process used today. You still have to have some kind of master, set it to make the parts. They make the parts off of what has been given either on a tape or a digital file, a group of digital files. So don't want to get too overloaded in that. Cassette. The cassette then was the next obvious progression. And you could get cassettes back in the 60s. I remember my brother having cassettes and bouncing some albums. And beautiful thing is that you could record. They had the little 2-track machines I was mentioning. I still got one here. I don't use it. Not 2-track, but a double cassette player. So you could sync it. And you can play one and record on one, and so make your mixtapes and all that. That was cassettes. But then eventually cassettes, they started making cassette players. I'm wondering why they didn't make them earlier. Was it an industry? Was it because they didn't want to? I don't know. Who knows why? That's something that I haven't researched yet. Maybe you want to research it on your own if you're interested. But you have, you went to the 8-track, but the cassette was a much better vehicle. You then were able to have full side A, side B. So you had the concept, you just had to flip the tape over, that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, side A, side B. It was a lot easier than even putting a record on and that. So, and it was in your car and it was convenient. So they dominated. So cassettes dominated. Albums kind of started fading out during the cassette period, not even the CD period. So a lot of people would take their albums, their vinyl albums, and record them to a cassette so they could take it in their car. So that was a thing too. A lot of you'd have an old album or something and say, yeah, I want to listen to this in my car. So you put it on a cassette. So cassettes were the thing. So into the 80s, probably starting in the late 70s. I don't know when the first cassette player but the automobile drove that transition. If there were no automobiles that people didn't have to drive, maybe there'd be just cassettes for home, but maybe there wouldn't be that. It wouldn't have taken over like it did, but that's what happened. So actually, I produced a couple projects for myself that were exclusively on cassette. So back in the day, in the 80s, you would release your album on cassette. So the concept of album, the word album. In fact, I was going to go to Lady Google, and I haven't talked to her yet today, and see what the definition of album is, just in general. Because I want to move beyond, and even just from the music standpoint, to talk about it in terms of of art in general, because there are albums of work for art. So let me see what the definition of album.
Here's the definition of album. A blank book for the insertion of photographs, stamps, or pictures.
Okay, well there is a two, because the two, I'm interesting that they put that one first. But being a musician, I think of it in the musical sense first. But insertion of photographs, stamps, or pictures, album. So your photo album, that's obviously. But as an artist, as a visual artist, could also put together an album of your work, and a collection. So maybe you more call it a collection of your artwork. But I would consider it an album, right? Related to, you go into the Art Institute, and you'll see a series of paintings that kind of have a similar theme by the same artist. It's kind of like, if you can relate to it from a musician saying, like, they're like songs, different songs, like done at a similar period, or with the same style, or with the same subject matter. Right? Either way, you kind of all look at it from those standpoints. But number two here that she didn't get to is a collection of recordings issued as a single item on CD, record, or another medium. Okay, so that's a fairly generic term. But yeah, so when people say album, a lot of people think of it as the vinyl record. And a lot of people record their album as a record. He's going, I'm going to record my next record. It kind of sounds British, I think. It makes it sound like it's really, something special. My record, this is your album. Album is not, and because a lot of people referred to a record album as being the vinyl album, as opposed to cassette or CD. All right. But I always say that this is my album on CD. All right. This is my album on vinyl. So nowadays that term is mostly used for what we knew as records. Is vinyl. We talk about it as vinyl. People understand that if you're into record collecting or anything. So that's vinyl versus CD. And and then eventually we talk about CD. CD was a huge difference, because now the quality has gotten to a point to where it's very clean. There's always still going to be that argument: is the actual vinyl record better than the CD, which is digital? One's base is an analog process. The CD is a digital process. You might record it in analog. You might process it analog, but eventually when you do put it on that CD, that you have to digitize it. It has to be a digital file, or a series of digital files that you're going to be putting on the CD, so that people are going to hear it back as digital. Now, to most ear, and even to my ear, if I listen to a record and I listen to a CD of that record without it being remastered or anything like that, there very little nuances that you could tell. There's a little bit of more definition from a digital. There's a little more natural kind of that, and that's the argument that people make. There's kind of a little more of a natural distortion, combining of frequencies. Whereas on the digital, it allows you, as long as you don't. This is more in engineering, but as long as you don't clip meaning reaching a point to where it's going to distort. When you do that on an analog, in any kind of analog situation, it creates a natural smooth distortion. Whereas in a digital realm, if all of a sudden you hit a certain ceiling and it's ready to distort, it just what we call craps out. It'll make noise that's kind of like not natural at all. Or a natural distortion in the analog versus the digital distortion being very electronic and so you have to be very careful and So like I said, sometimes when you push that natural distortion, and that goes for any kind of amplifier or anything like that, some people love that sound, that natural, still clean, but like natural distortion. Like you might play a clean guitar part, but you don't want to play it too what they call skinny. You don't want to keep it. You want to push it to a point to where you start teasing that distortion, and you'll get that at level. So sounds heated, but still clean and true. So these are all terminology. Most musicians will kind of get it. If you're a guitar player, I'm sure you understand where that's coming from. But in the recording process, it's basically the same. I mean, that analog is kind of like that tube to digital thing too, where but they've gotten to a point to where they've smoothed it out enough on the digital where you get a solid state amp, and solid state's still different than digital, complete digital. So, but that's a whole different discussion that I'm going off into that maybe we'll get to someday. Anyway, so that's the Lady Google's album thing. So yeah, it's a collection of works, little works of art, little works of craft, little memories of pictures, memories, whatever it is, an album. That's what was happening with music. There was that album concept and that A, side B, and we had cassettes. Now you get to CD. Now there's no way to do a side A, side B, so we lose that. We lose that part of the album concept. We're still an album. We're still a collection. Also, another thing that I brought up last time is shuffle play. You get into a situation where you want to listen to 3 or 4 CDs and kind of like, you want to mix them. So now we've got we've for many years, we've had the ability to kind of like have a 5 CD player and put it into that mode, so it mixes, so it plays one from here, one from there, and track 5 from here, track 2 from here, track 3 from there. So you got that mixing. You got it like a spontaneous mix tape or whatever you want to call it would be, if you want to make an analogy to the cassette. So this is similar, but it's more of a spontaneous thing that's happening when you do that random play, shuffle play, random play, whatever comes out. So you're not getting, now when musicians put together an album, we have at least I do, and most people that I know put in thought to the order of the songs. So you don't want to put maybe 2 songs in a row that have the exact same feel unless they're meant to be together like that, some kind of medley or something. But you want to kind of mix feels a little bit, but you don't want to go too far off base. You don't want to maybe put 2 ballads, 2 slow songs in a row if you're kind of more of a rock edged band, or even like a more higher energy country band. You don't want to limit yourself to the amount of ballads that you have on the album. You might only have maybe 3 out of the 12 song album. You maybe have 3 ballads, 3, 4, depending on the type of artist. So you don't want, so it's important how you so when people sit down to listen to it, it's an experience, and that one song leads to the other, and this would be a good one to follow this one with. So that is considered, and as it goes, as CD even progressed, that people would still listen to CDs on a holistic. Was that a good way to put it? Listening to the whole album when it's one sitting, and a lot of times you might just one sitting, it might be 5 tunes or 6 tunes. We talk about, there's also a concept of EP I didn't bring up last time, but the EP, extended play single. That's basically what it means. So extended play means 3 songs, 4 songs. A lot of people are doing that now. They're kind of, I think now it's moving back more into that than, because when you did an album project, you had to put a lot of time, effort, money into producing that product that you're going to sell or give away, whatever it is. Like an album, full size album, you had to have the artwork, you had to have the graphics and all this. It took for that to print the album, costs a lot of money, and you can put it in. So if you're not going to do 3-song album. You know, if you got 12 songs, you want to put it on the damn album if they fit. So, and as the CDs came around, then you had more time. Now you could put 15 tunes, 16, 17, depending on the lengths of your tunes. There's still kind of a limit, but you had a lot more. So, I mean, people were loading up and that. The fact that people don't listen, the time, you know, the attention span that people have now, because there's so much going on. There's so much stimulus to people right now. I mean, you know, you have besides radio, TV, you know, your CD player, your the cable TV now, the internet, and you know, then you got 12 different ways to listen to the internet, and whatever, and video games. Obviously, I'm not even in that world. I used to like playing video games in bars and stuff, and pinball, and that's as far as I got with that. But you know, people just live for that shit. So you know, people won't depend as much on sitting down listening to a full album or even an album side. You know, like I was saying before, you know, they might have their favorite album side. That I feel like listening to side A of Sinatra's. You know, I don't know Sinatra's name of his album, say, but like I said, most of them early on at least were based on the hits. But yeah, you get in the mood, you want that, you put that artist on, or that album specific to that artist. So you've had that album was important. You know, the collection of works was important to the listeners, and the listeners obviously drive. You know, listeners can be manipulated. That gets into a little bit of a political discussion that we'll have at a different point about, you know, it's about the labels, and we've talked a little bit about labels pushing the same old shit. You know, trying to use all that old music that we've been listening to for years. You know, it takes up a lot of the airwaves, takes up a lot of the space, and a lot of the new music doesn't have a chance. And a lot of the new music that is like a what would you call a son or offspring, you know, offspring of a lot of that great music that we knew. They're just going to play that same. So, you know, you're going to hear the Lynyrd Skynyrd, you're going to hear the Led Zeppelin, you're going to hear the Black Sabbath, you're going to hear the like that, and you're going to hear the same old country guys, and we love them. You know, I mean, whatever. You hear Hank Williams, Merle Haggard, and that's all good. Johnny Cash and that. All right, but there's a different reason they're not playing that just because they think it's the greatest music. It's because they own the damn music. All right, so the publishers and the labels are pushing that product and making sure that product continues to be pushed so they continue to make money off of it. And so that is, if you look at it, I mean, if you, I don't care what business you have, if people are willing to consume the same damn thing, you're not going to worry about making something new. I mean, it's like Coke, you know, they tried to make the new Coke, and I think that was a weird scam too, the way when they did that. But if anybody's old enough to remember the new Coke, they said up north, oh, I love the old Cokes, and then they came out with Coca-Cola Classic. So maybe that's why they did it. They figured they'd take this thing and they throw out some other, you know, tasting Coke, and who knows, it might have been the same thing. They just put a different label on it. But it did. I mean, at the time, I did notice a difference between the two. But so everybody was up in arms. So they got back to the class. So yeah, if somebody's willing to buy or consume the same stuff, then of course you're going to keep pushing it. You're going to keep, you know, selling it. So if people wonder, you know, it's like, you know, there are certain genres that maybe that doesn't apply so much to, especially when anything that relates to that top 40, you know, rankings of music, you know, country, R&B, you know, pop, you know, rock, you know, all the ones that you'll see in Billboard magazine, top 40. They'll have all the different classifications of charts. So the ones that the top charters and stuff like that, they're going to keep playing that as long as they can until people turn them off. And who knows what the next media is going to be for consumption from from radio, TV, internet. Now everything's going onto the internet, and the airwaves are basically just local stuff, and that's all. Like I said, a whole nother discussion. But we're moving ahead here beyond the CD. Now we're talking about the CD. It doesn't have the side A, side B anymore. And coming back, then we're saying, okay, now maybe EPs. People were making shorter CDs because of attention span, and in fact, it's like, hey, I got 3 or 4 songs. It's getting a little cheaper to make CDs at the beginning. It was pretty expensive, and you had to make a real hardcore investment in order to put a CD out. It became, the price, like anything, it's like there's more companies and competition drives the price down. The cost of the materials were getting a lot cheaper. So we were able to say, okay, I can do a 3 or 4 tune off here. And then maybe I can include those 3 or 4 on the full length CD later on, so, there's a little marketing things that people are testing with all this. But the actual album concept of being songs that have like a certain continuity. We say like I'm from my perspective, my album concepts are divided mainly in band driven material versus acoustic driven material. So, and that'll cross over too. So just even on my band stuff, I'll throw in like just a solo acoustic song on the band album. So I might have 14 songs. I have 1 acoustic one. 2 are kind of basically acoustic, maybe driven by acoustic guitar, but has drums and bass. So you might have that, but most of the songs on that are representative of the band thing that I'm doing. And then now the project I'm working on right now is driven by the more acoustic and dynamically less what would you call it, intrusive than a more of a folk rock, country rock kind of thing that I'm doing with the band. So there'll be a few more ballad-esque type songs on it. Couple, there's still a couple of drivers, 3 or 4 that have some that really drive on it. But so I'm piecing together this album and there are certain tunes that that's not going to fit. That's not going to fit. So from my perspective, I'm putting tunes in that I think are going to fit the progression. And I'm thinking right now, I'm at the point where I'm thinking of that order that I'm going to make that album. Now, I'm going to keep doing that. I'm an older guy. I've been doing that, so I think people still that know me still respect that and still would enjoy that approach to where, oh, you're releasing a new album. I can't wait to hear it. The album, the whole album. They're not saying, oh, you're releasing a new song. I'll throw a song up. I've done some singles and things like that. So, just using myself an example to say that, from an album, different people have a different approach to creating albums. Okay, some like to delve into and write and say, I'm gonna take a concept. I'm gonna write songs within this. Like when Paul Simon, he went to Africa. I remember he went to Africa and he hired a bunch of African musicians. Said, I'm gonna kind of gear my sound and everything towards that, and kind of use those guys, those musicians, and then have a certain sound to come out of that. And a lot of the, I think most of the, if you talk about the Graceland album, most of the themes were kind of like very working class, rootsy, driven stuff. So there was a conceptually around the themes as well. So, there's different approaches to how you do it. I'm not saying Paul Simon always does it that way, but he just for a few albums that he's done. I remember he did one. I forgot the name of the album. But anyway, so you got my gist. Moving ahead here, we're moving beyond the CD now. I don't know if a lot of you out there still might have your CD collections. You might still have a CD player in your car, and you're still living, a music consumption life of CDs. So, which is, to let you know, it's going to be a little more difficult to maintain that regular, music listening experience. If you're eventually going to buy a new car, you're going to have to order a specialist CD for it. So be aware of that. So it's going away now. Everything now you can plug in. What I did, my CD player went out last fall. My CD player went out after I got back from my summer tour last year, and I said, "Oh, okay, I don't have a CD player anymore." So what I'm going to do, I have the Google, so I have the YouTube, and I decided to do like I'm doing a premium YouTube thing so that I could get songs. So I would just when I was on my fall tour, I just plugged in my tablet and dialed up a playlist, whatever I want, whatever, some popular playlists, just to have something. It wasn't as great as being able to play some CDs. And what it didn't, it was hard to find independent stuff and that. So there's a problem with doing it that way as well. And that's just more of my makeshift way of saying, okay, I can do that. It's cheap enough for me to do. I watch a lot of podcasting too. So that, $12 a month I'm spending for that is well spent with a lot of things that I'm involved with. So it works for me. Or obviously you have your iTunes that you can plug in and all that. So that's what people are doing now. They're kind of, they're using their phone to plug directly in to the car system now. You have XM radio, which is a satellite radio, so you can get radio anywhere you go, and it's like specific, all different kinds of programs, and it's a wide variety of programs. So that you have that concept. But the actual tangible, what I'm talking about here is the tangible media, the record, the cassette, the 8-track tape, the CD, the where are we now beyond CD. It's something if you are a musical artist and you're not concerned or at least wondering what the hell's going to happen next. And I've been asking and I've been talking to different people. And obviously people are saying, well, I put it up online and I'm doing that, I'm putting my stuff up online, but I think there's still that contingency. And I think there will continually be a certain amount of people that are going to want to have that physical item. I think it's going to be missed. Whether that means that the CD is going to come back, I'm not sure. I've considered and I've talked to people, and some people are starting to do a thumb drive, flash drive, putting your music on there, packaging that up somehow, and selling that as merch at your shows. It's something I haven't gone to yet, but I'm considering that it might be the next thing that I do to have that. I know a lot of people will probably just, because I think we're going to lose a connection. There's like I said, we're at that cusp, and a lot of people just aren't into downloading for iTunes and putting stuff on their computer and all that. Some people, that's all they do. So if you're not in that world, you're not going to be a part of it. But there's going to be contingencies kind of going to be kind of left around. And right now they're listening to their old CDs, and as far as the record companies go, if you want to buy the same thing, and they'll probably still be making CDs for the foreseeable future for people that still have CD players and that. But we're at a cusp right now where we're going to have to kind of figure it out. Now we already said that a lot of people are starting to do EPs, shorter length. There's a lot of one-offs, and then you've got things like these shorts on. You got the TikTok and the Facebook Shorts, and these little people doing like little 30-second slots of a tune and kind of making a whatever it is, some kind of cutesy dance or whatever it is. I mean, it's people are consuming that as music, and it is. Some of them are cool. Some of them work well if you're very creative with it. to do like just a short bit, like a little short bit that works. But in order to tell a story and have a song that's 3-4 minute song, now you have to put that song up and get that and people aren't that attention span of the shorts for those people. They might listen a little bit of your song, whatever. They might listen to it, the whole thing through. You never know. But the concept is to have people. You do want people to, if you make this a living, like I said, mostly on the grassroots here, it isn't about the living. It's about just getting your art, your music heard. You want to get out there to the as much as the masses that you can. So you like any artist, I think, would like to have their stuff seen or heard or felt. As a you want people to take your stuff in and be emotionally affected by it or inspired by it, whatever. So you need to make that connection, and you need to have these are the vehicles, the media of the recorded music for what I do and for what a lot of people that I know do. And we're changing. We need to figure. Like I said, the underlying theme of my whole series here is the Renaissance, the grassroots Renaissance, and this is one of the parts of it. Is that we're going to have to, excuse me, we're going to have to figure out strategies to get our music heard. We have the people that want the same old shit listened to all the time. That stuff's going to be pushed, and they have their marketing thing, and they have people that promote that and get that out, and they're on top of all the media and stuff like that. But the grassroots, we have to now look for new ways, and like the people doing the shorts, that's helping them. I mean, you say one of my favorite musical acts on YouTube, and you see him on Facebook too, is that Walk Across the Earth. Is that right? Is that the name? How you pronounce that? And they were coming and doing like just one song. They worked up a lot of choreography, routines, different like everybody playing one huge guitar or something, and they're all singing harmonies different. And this guy's knocking his head for percussion or whatever, kind of like fun stuff. I mean, fun, very attractive. Meaning, people see that, oh, that's cute, that's cool. No, they'll stay with it, and it's ingenious. It's great stuff. So that's one way to kind of get that, but that's that's a mess. That's a sea of frustration to go to try to make it on Facebook or make it just specifically on YouTube, because I mean, that is one way to get your stuff out there, and I think most people should have that and do have that. If you're kind of serious about your art, you have to get the music out there, and that's one of the vehicles. I've done a couple little vehicles videos that I've put out that are kind of choreographed and kind of fun. You can find that on my other YouTube page, the Mark Zeus Music. There's a bunch there, so that's a little blurb about my other page. You might want to go there and check it out. So so we're looking for that. Like I said, is it going to be that thumb drive? Am I going to have to start putting it all on there? I'm using Bandcamp right now. I just released the Thunderbolts album on Bandcamp. I got this new one will also be there. Trying to push that one because it looks like they're very artist friendly. They're so to this point, I've had a good experience with the few tracks that I have sold. They responded well. I got the payment. And it isn't, like I said, for me at this point, it isn't about making money with the online stuff. Hopefully, I will be able to get compensated through that. My compensation comes through doing live shows and through, whatever they're willing to pay me, and the graciousness of people to tip. So, I mean, that's how I'm surviving mostly right now. And there's been a lot of kinks in that work between health and obviously the pandemic. A couple of years past that now, who knows what's around the next corner. So we're having to put jockey in the position here because we have you know, as much as I don't like arts to be a competition, but there is, I mean, you've got a lot of people trying to do this and that and everything. And you got that big monster, that marketing machine from the big boys that are pushing the same old shit. And the new stuff, they want to sound like the stuff that just came out. So they're very methodical about, so something really quality good, but not in the popular vein that's happening today. Okay, that's getting left behind. So we're getting a lot of, so that needs to be, as we progress as a community of artists, we need to understand that we need to kind of share and move our vehicle along. Not so much to counteract, but to on a level compete with stuff that's already ingrained and people are used to at the same old stuff. So we need to grow from the grassroots, as you say. We need to keep growing, and the ideas that we have, and like we said, we need new medias. We need new media being a plural. Okay, let me see what else I got here. We're talking about. Yeah, I did mention we've basically come full circle back to, like I said, the short. If you think about it, at the beginning, I'm saying we have the short. The cylinder came out on a record player, and it's kind of put it on, and you listen to music for about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and that's what you got. Okay, now you got to get another one. You put that on there, and it's like so these short bursts, and then it got to a point to where when the album developed, the rise of the album came to where you had now you can listen to multiple tunes, and you had this, you had that. I listen to side A, side B of an album, that kind of thing, and it's got to where it's a major collection of songs or artwork, even if you want to go and talk about that, to where technology and allowed, the internet allows now for a visual artist to have their own website, to put up all visuals, at least visuals of their painting, so that they can, let's say you have a gallery that's presenting your work. You can broadcast that on your website. You can put that on your Facebook page and all that. So I mean, this is all ways to do it, to get that exposure that you want, and to get people to come out and see your work. Yeah. Theaters, another. I get worried a little bit about grassroots theater. It's because they're like for the same reason of a lot of grassroots music gets kind of buried because it's the same old stuff. It's the same old thing with theater, like the new stuff. And it takes so much to put a theater production together, put a real theater production together. I had a buddy here that my buddy Jack, good songwriter, and but he decided he was going to write a play, and he wrote a play called Covidius about. And I haven't gotten a chance to see it yet. Hopefully, he's going to. He put together a production. I wasn't able to make the production, but hopefully he does it again. But bottom line is, it took him a bunch of money and connections, and put this to put it. I mean, he's not really a producer or director of theater, but he wrote when he wanted to get it done. So he had to, he hired some people, and he got some people to help out, and got to a point to where he got it done. And I guess it was pretty good. And hopefully they're going to do it again. And yeah, but so man, it's just it's such a struggle to maintain the theater group, and rents are so high, and all that. It's just like opening a music venue. Like I opened one. I did for 3 years, not quite 3 years, and man, it was paying the bills and trying to keep everything rolling, and not being a rich guy, having to borrow money, and eventually it's kind of got nope, can't do this anymore. I'm too far in debt. But I don't want to go too deeply into that kind of stuff. But it's always a struggle to to maintain that brick and mortar. So as I'm able to at least have a home studio here, I do go to other studios and work with other people, and you know it's still affordable. And then they might maintain a studio if you have a remote studio, you know, like is getting more expensive too. So things are changing in the world of music art, and so that's pretty much where I wanted to take this to kind of leave questions in your head about as artists, or people who support the art, is to you know, to start looking around to see, well, okay, where is another, where are other avenues? Like I just mentioned, the XM radio. People might not know about that. That's more pop. It kind of is. It's not as popular as your network stations that are playing the top 40 and all that stuff today, and the same old stuff, like I said, the country legends and the rock radio, you know, the classic rock stations and all that. But and you got a lot more to choose from there. But and I mentioned the YouTube thing. It's limited in that, but we're going to have to start as artists and as listeners. Maybe as a listener, you like CD. You might still continue to buy CDs, and that creates a demand. And maybe it will reverse, maybe it won't. I think I'm open to the possibility that might happen. That we're going to have what I don't want to use the word renaissance overtly, but we're going to have like a resurgence of CD interests in, and I remember they had the little small discs. There was a compact disc or whatever. What did they call it? I forget. But anyway, that didn't really take off much. So, and I think the big boys are relishing the time when they don't have to put out any physical product. You're just going to go and you're going to buy a streaming service subscription that they get a chunk out of. All right. Or if you are going to buy it, you're going to have to buy it from online and download it. But I think you get to what they'd love to go to is just to have everybody on subscription. You'll own nothing and be happy. So that's where they want to go. But so we're looking for tangible media for recording, and things that I'm thinking about and things I like to get out there. All right, so I'm going to end it kind of there. I will be in town. I'm heading on the road pretty soon. I just small asides here. I had vehicle problems. I had to change my vehicle. I'm in the process of trying to make that roadworthy. I had a bunch of other issues come up, and so I'm taking care of it. So I've got one more presentation next week. I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I hit the road. YouTube does not allow you to broadcast live from a phone or tablet on those feeds. You have to be. I would have to be on a Wi-Fi on the laptop. That's what I am right now. I'm at home on a Wi-Fi on the laptop. So I will take a laptop with me, but I might not be able to be in a situation where I can get a good Wi-Fi signal for this. So we'll see what happens when I hit the road. But I'm committed to keep doing these things and to keep discussion open. So I'm hoping one day somebody will come in and start a discussion, and we can collaborate on some ideas. But yeah, you're at Folk You Zeus, and spread the word, and make sure you subscribe and like the video, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you very much.